I'm very fortunate that my fibromyalgia and CFS are pretty mild, all things considered, but that's not just by random chance. There's a lot of things that I've done over the years to help improve my symptoms, so I wanted to share those with you here today. My name's Eliana Camargo, and I'm the Healing Fairy. So let's jump into it. With chronic illness, there's not just one solution that makes things better. There's a million different puzzle pieces that all come together that incrementally make small changes and all together make a big difference in your health. So first I'll talk about the foundational things that really everybody should be doing in order to be healthy. And then later in the video, I'll be talking more about the meat and potatoes or the specialty things that I do to help my fibromyalgia and CFS. So first and probably most important is sleep. I know we all know that sleep is super important, that we should be getting 8 hours a day, but genuinely this is a non-negotiable for me. I do not sacrifice my sleep for anything because it's one of the biggest causes of me flaring up. So I am religious about my sleep, and all my friends know it, that unfortunately I'm not gonna be staying out late. So that's just living life with a chronic illness. I'm not gonna be the friend that goes out and parties or goes to the bar until midnight. I make sure that I'm in bed minimum 8.5 hours, even better 9 hours before I know I'm supposed to wake up. And going along with that is making sure that you have good sleep hygiene, that you're not scrolling your phone before bed, you have dim lights across the house, you're not having caffeine in the evening. All the things you're supposed to do for good sleep, I do it because I get extremely depressed if I get even one night of 6 hours of sleep. I am legitimately like depressed the next day. And if I go multiple days with less than 8 hours of sleep, I legitimately become suicidal, and it's not a fun time. So that's the number one thing that I take care of, is my sleep. Number two is diet. This is also a huge one. In general, I try to eat as healthy and whole foods as I can, within reason. I have balance in my life, but there are some foods that I completely eliminate because they also cause me to flare up. Number one being gluten. Number two being rice, which is very unfortunate if you can't eat gluten. And the reason why I cut those out is because I have this genetic mutation called MTHFR, which, long story short, makes it so my body's lacking the MTHF enzyme, which is necessary to convert the vitamin folate into the version that your cells use called methylfolate, which is all fine and dandy. I just have to supplement methylfolate and I'll be fine. Except rice, wheat, and a bunch of other foods are fortified with folic acid, which is the synthetic version of the vitamin folate. And my body doesn't know what the heck to do with that at all. The folic acid builds up in my system and makes me very sick. And so I have to avoid folic acid at all costs, which means no eating wheat, no eating rice, and a bunch of other random things like protein shakes and random stuff that they put folic acid in. Oh, and corn. Recently, California passed a law requiring all corn tortillas to have folic acid. So my beloved Mexican food is now off the table, which is fantastic. But despite the reason why me having to avoid these foods being related to my MTHFR and the folic acid, if I do eat folic acid-free versions of wheat and rice, which do exist if you source them out, I still do have impacts on my health. It's just not as extreme as when it's combined with the folic acid. So I don't know fully completely what that's about. But long story short, wheat and rice make me incredibly ill. They make my symptoms worse. They make me need to sleep 13 hours a day. They make me super dizzy and get vertigo. They make my muscles really weak, like if I have the flu, fibro flu. So this isn't necessarily going to apply to everybody. You have to experiment with your diet and see what your body needs. You can even do an elimination diet where you cut out all of the major allergens for only 1 month and see if you get any better, and then slowly reintroduce them and see if you have any reactions to get an idea of what foods are good or bad for you. But for me, wheat and rice. Oh, another thing, I'm very sensitive to nightshades, which are tomatoes, all kinds of peppers, including spices that have peppers, eggplant, and potatoes. And unfortunately, those are my favorite foods. Tomatoes, peppers, and potatoes. I love them so much. And so I try to eat them in moderation because they are my favorite foods. And it's not like gluten where I have to completely cut it out. I can still eat some of it and feel fine. But if I eat too much of it, I start getting really inflamed, and then my mouth will start to hurt. Like my mouth will get all inflamed and swell up, and then it gets painful to eat. And then I get more joint pain and more brain fog and more fatigue. So that's another thing. I could probably stand to cut it out and reduce it from my diet even more, but then I won't be able to eat anything that I love. And so I eat it in moderation, but that's something to consider. Also, fun fact, goji berries and ashwagandha are nightshades too. So if you're also sensitive to nightshades, there's a few other random foods that outside of the main four that are also nightshades. And there's other things I do to improve my diet, like eating mostly low glycemic. That means foods that don't spike and crash your blood sugar. I like to make sure that I get enough protein in every meal and not too many carbs or not too many processed simplified carbs or too much sugar, so that my blood sugar's not spiking and crashing, because that also has a huge impact on my health. I also like to limit my consumption of alcohol and coffee. They're not completely off limits, but I don't drink very often. Maybe at most 2 drinks a month, and that's like on a heavy drinking month. Sometimes I'll go months without drinking. And coffee, I try to do at most once a week, but even less than that is even better, because when I drink coffee, I crash like crazy. It's not great for me. So instead I like to drink tea. Black tea is my favorite. Every single morning I'll have a cup, and by a cup I mean a mug, which is probably actually 2 cups. Have some right here as I'm filming this video. And then sometimes I'll have some in the afternoon, but I try not to too late in the afternoon or else it will impact my sleep. But I love my tea. And I've tried all kinds of crazy diets to improve my health, because I was promised that being vegan would heal me, or being raw vegan would heal me, or being grain-free would heal me, or all these crazy diets. I have tried so many. And over time, I've learned what works for my body. And for me personally, I think that eating a little bit of animal products makes me feel my best. I could go into a whole video about why I'm not vegan or why I'm no longer vegan, because there's a lot of nuance to that. But one thing that I have learned about my diet and what makes me feel the healthiest is actually not being too extreme. I talked before about how I try to eat a lot of whole foods. I used to be so strict about this, like so meticulously not eating any condiments or sauces that had any ounce of sugar or citric acid or any kind of additive that wasn't a whole food in it. Cooking 100% of my meals from home, 365 days a year, like insane, meticulous, whole food to the T. You know the saying, too much of a good thing's actually bad for you? It's bad for your mental health to be that dogmatic and that strict with the foods that you're eating. It can actually lead to orthorexia, which is an eating disorder where you eat so healthy to the extreme that it's actually in detriment to your health. That can either be because you're restricting so much that you actually start not eating enough or missing out on certain nutrients, or just psychologically creates food fear. And fearing food is not good for you. There's a huge mind-body connection, and you can actually start to have psychosomatic reactions to certain foods, not because that food's actually bad for you, but because you're fearing it. And it's just not fun to live life restricting your foods to only vegetables and meat with no sauce on it. Like, it's not, or when I was doing this, I was vegan, so not even meat, but vegetables and nuts and seeds. It's not sustainable and it's not healthy. If your brain's not healthy, your body's not gonna be healthy. And we'll get into that more later in the video. But while I think it's so important to eat a whole foods diet, I also think it's equally important to not be so strict about it that it creates an eating disorder, because that will also impact your health. You know, having processed foods in moderation is probably not gonna kill you. I finished filming and realized I wanted to add something. I wanted to acknowledge how difficult it can be to cook when you are chronically ill. And so some of my tips on how to eat healthy when you don't have the energy to cook is, 1, utilizing frozen veggies, frozen meat, things that you can just throw in a pan or throw in the oven and have a healthy meal without having to chop or do a lot of like standing around work. Oh, 2, also having a bar stool with a counter so you can sit while you're cooking or like chopping. Game changing. Also, when you do have energy to cook like a big meal of something that freezes well, like a soup or a chili, a stew, something like that, and freeze portions in the freezer in like single serving portions. You can even use super cubes. They're these like silicone cubes that come in serving size portions that you can freeze, and then whenever you need to, you can just microwave a healthy meal that you've already prepared in your freezer. And 3rd, so I have like a list of restaurants in my mind that have healthy options like just fish and veggies, or other kinds of meat and veggies, quinoa and greens, protein, different kinds of options like that, so that I know if I'm flaring up and I don't have the energy to cook, I can DoorDash a healthy meal from a restaurant, which is also a privilege because DoorDash and eating out is expensive, but that's why I highly recommend batch cooking meals and keeping them in the freezer. Okay, moving on to the next thing that I do. Still kind of in the diet family, but supplements. I take a metric fuck ton of supplements. Makes me look like an old lady with all my pill bottles on the coffee table where I eat most of my meals. I wish I could cut back on how many I take, but I've experimented a lot over the past decade with a ton of different supplements, and I only take the ones that I've actually seen a remarkable improvement in my health. If it's not doing anything for my health, I stopped taking it. So on the screen, I'm listing all of the supplements I take, but I'm gonna call out a few key ones that specifically have helped my fibromyalgia, because I take all these supplements for all kinds of different reasons, but the ones that I've noticed have the biggest impact, or the ones that I would continue taking if I really did have to narrow it down to just a few. Number one, most important, is a B complex that has methylfolate in it. For the reasons stated before, my body doesn't convert folate to methylfolate very efficiently, and so I have to take this in order to feel healthy. But also just a B complex in general. It also has B12 in the methylcobalamin version of it, which is also the more bioavailable version of B12, and all the other B vitamins. And I noticed when I started taking this, a fog cleared in my brain that I had had for years. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I felt so good as soon as I started taking this. So this is my holy grail supplement. I notice if I stop taking it for a few days, my mental health starts declining very fast. Brain fog, depression, needing to sleep a lot. This one is huge for me. The next important one is CoQ10, which helps the mitochondria and all of the cells in your body produce ATP, or energy. And that is so important for chronic fatigue syndrome, because if you have CFS, you know that it's not being sleepy or just being tired, or like if a normal person goes for a long run, they're just like kind of fatigued afterwards. This is a cellular fatigue. Like you feel like a robot that's battery pack is running on 0.5%. Like your heart is just gonna like shut down at any moment. This is not a normal fatigue. This is like a cellular fatigue. And part of the reason is because of mitochondrial dysfunction, that our mitochondria doesn't produce energy the way that a healthy person does. So taking CoQ10 has been huge in helping the mitochondria do what it's supposed to do and creating energy. But for this one, it's kind of a long-acting supplement. Taking it one day, you're not really gonna notice an effect. It actually takes a couple months for it to build up in your system and for the mitochondria to go through all of its processes and actually utilize it. So this is one you've definitely gotta stick with. I've noticed when I've tried coming off it in the past that as the weeks go on, I feel that CFS fatigue lasting all day long. And then when I come back on the CoQ10, it very slowly fades away over the weeks. And I've gone through that cycle of experimenting, coming on and off of it so many times that I've really tuned into exactly how it makes me feel. And it's been a huge one for me. Another shout out is iron. If you're deficient, you're not gonna have a lot of energy. But I specifically take the iron bisglycinate version because the normal iron that doctors prescribe you isn't always very well absorbed in the body and can give you stomach discomfort when you take it. But the bisglycinate version of iron is a lot more easily absorbed and it doesn't give me any stomach discomfort at all. So highly recommend that specific type of iron. And my last shout out is choline, which is a pseudovitamin. It's commonly found in eggs, and it's a pseudovitamin that's really important for brain health. And also if you have MTHFR, you oftentimes need more choline than the average person. And I've definitely noticed when I started taking both iron and choline, felt like it could function more clearly. So those are my supplement standouts, but you can go back and pause the video on the long list of them if you're curious about all the supplements I take and why. Again, this is a very personal thing. So this is what helps me, but what supplements you need to take might be more tailored to you and something that you need to experiment with. I haven't found any miracle supplement that makes me feel completely better. Every single time I tried a new supplement, I was convinced that this was gonna be the cure to my fibromyalgia and CFS, and that everything was gonna be better after that. It never was. It was always just a tiny little piece of the pie that it would make me feel 5% better. But 5% on top of 5% on top of 5% slowly adds up to a very full pie chart when you incorporate especially the next tips that I'm about to mention. Okay, so last one in the foundational things that I do is exercise. And I actually made an entire video about how I exercise with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, because if you know, you know. It's incredibly difficult to exercise with especially chronic fatigue syndrome, but both of them. So I made a whole in-depth video about what mindset you should go into it with, tips and tricks, how to not flare up, how to the name of the game is low and slow. You wanna go super light and easy and not think about exercise the way that society tells you to just grind and feel the burn, and if you're not doing that, then you might as well just be a stick in the mud. I don't know what that means, but you can watch that video right up here if you want a more in-depth on how to exercise with chronic illness. But my key takeaway is yoga. Yoga is such a godsend. It seems kind of counterintuitive that fibromyalgia causes pain. For me specifically, it's joint pain. When I do yoga, in the long term, my joint pain becomes massively reduced. And when I stop exercising, stop doing yoga, the joint pain starts creeping back. And it's kind of wild how direct the correlation is between moving my body and joint pain being reduced. So highly recommend yoga. Okay, so moving on to the more fun part of the video, the more specialty things that I do to help my health. And they all have to do with the mind-body connection. And I know there's a lot of different rhetoric in the medical community about what causes fibromyalgia, what causes CFS, and how, especially in decades past, doctors would try to chalk it off to, oh, it's all in your head, and then send you to a therapist, and they'd be like, well, I don't know how to treat this. This isn't in my wheelhouse. And then they send you to a rheumatologist, and then they're like, well, nothing's actually physically wrong with you, and they send you to somewhere else. And it all kind of comes back to, it's just in your head. You're making it up. Just ta-da-da, go live your life now. And while that's not true, it's not just you're making it up, it's in your head, you're making it up. In that sense, there is a huge connection between your brain and your physiology. And there's actually a lot of studies that show that PTSD can trigger fibromyalgia. And if you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which talks a lot about the mind-body connection and how when you have PTSD or any kind of emotional trauma, your brain doesn't correctly communicate with your nervous system. And as we know, fibromyalgia is a big nervous system issue, and its nervous system is misfiring because the brain's not communicating properly with it. And so this is probably one of the biggest, most important things that helps improve symptoms of fibromyalgia and CFS is tackling it at the root, at the nervous system level. And there's many different modalities, many different ways of doing this. First and simplest being, if you have any kind of unresolved emotional trauma or just anything that's been bugging you whatsoever, journaling every single day, or anytime you have emotions coming up, tuning in and asking yourself every day, like, is there anything my body wants to tell me? Is there anything my emotions want to tell me? And not letting it just sit inside you and fester. Talking to a therapist, even better. But going one step further, something that I absolutely love and adore with my whole heart is EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's kind of a silly name, but essentially what it is it combines acupressure with cognitive affirmations. And so we all know about acupuncture, sticking needles in different meridians of the body, and a lot of insurance companies actually pay for this because there's actual science that this helps the body. Well, you don't just need needles to do it. You can also like press on pressure points in the body, and that can activate different parts of the brain, like the amygdala. And so if you press on these acupressure points while saying these certain therapeutic phrases, it really helps you release your emotions so much more than just talking it out or journaling does, or even doing other like physicality. Like we all know if you're anxious and you go for a run, it can kind of make you feel better if you're capable of running. But for some reason, I don't know how it works, but doing EFT, tapping on these pressure points while saying these certain phrases, just immediately tears start running, or laughter, or like all kinds of these like physical sensations happen of releasing emotions out of my body. So if you want to look more into EFT and check it out, I highly recommend Brad Yates on YouTube. He is the king of EFT. I love him so much. He is an earth angel. He's fantastic. If you have any kind of emotion that you're dealing with that you're struggling to release, I recommend typing in Brad Yates and then anxiety, or dealing with a narcissist, or feeling rejected, or like any kind of emotion. He has thousands of videos, and you'll most likely find one on that topic. You can even, when you start the video, kind of mentally check in with yourself and ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is that emotion? And then when the video is over, see how intense it is, and just, it's night and day. And truly, when I've released those emotions, physical pain goes away, my energy comes online. Like, it's crazy how dramatic this works. And it might sound kind of woo-woo or weird, but really, what do you have to lose? If you're chronically ill and in pain or fatigued all the time, the videos are 5 to 10 minutes long. Like, just try it out once and see how you feel about it. And the next thing that I've done in this similar vein is hypnotherapy, which there's also a lot of studies on hypnotherapy and fibromyalgia. So lots of scientific research about how this helps. But I did it for the first time in 2020 when I had my worst fibromyalgia flare-up, which is actually in the end of 2019 what caused me to get the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. I had been dealing with it for years before then, but it flared up to its worst. You can actually, I made a story time about that, how Adderall actually caused that to happen. So if you're curious, why Adderall ruined my life and how I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, you can watch the video over here. But I deep dived on the internet and found out how there's a huge link between PTSD and fibromyalgia, and I have a couple cases of PTSD, including CPTSD, which actually kind of ended up being the main culprit. CPTSD being complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is when instead of one big event happening to you, it's like a bunch of little events happening that all compound and create PTSD in your brain. I went to hypnotherapy to deal with this, and she had dealt with other clients with fibromyalgia as well and helped them improve and watched them go from being in bed to traveling across Europe, which is insane and incredible. And so I gave it a shot and I loved it. I loved the experience so much. I really want to make a whole video about hypnotherapy one day and the experiences that I had with it. But, you know, it took multiple sessions, but the pain that I was experiencing, like I couldn't walk without a boot brace or crutches, and steadily the pain was going down and down through doing hypnotherapy, and it healed a lot of the trauma that I had with CPTSD. So that one, highly, highly recommend. I don't think talk therapy is very effective for PTSD whatsoever. I think at most they kind of teach you how to cope with the symptoms, but hypnotherapy, I guess I should probably describe what hypnotherapy is. Hypnotherapy is essentially a guided meditation that's personalized to you, where they talk you into a subconscious state, a very deep meditative state, and then there's different ways of going about it when you're in that meditative state, but they essentially talk to your deepest mind. So the way PTSD works is, imagine all of your memories are books on the shelves in a library. And when you have a traumatic memory, your body doesn't file that memory on the bookshelf the way it's supposed to. It shatters it on the ground. Imagine this book is made out of glass, okay? So it shatters the book on the ground, it doesn't store it away properly, and your subconscious or your mind is kind of like the librarian walking up and down the shelves of the library. And if they want to, they can pick out a book, look at it, put it back. But when they walk over the shards of glass on the floor, they get taken back to that memory like if it's the present moment, and it then starts to have physiological impacts on your body. And so what the hypnotherapy does is, when you're in that deep meditative state, it helps you sweep up the shards of glass and glue it all back together and put it on the shelf. So you can look at that memory if you want to, but it's no longer just lying on the floors of the library and disrupting you in your day-to-day life. And so there's, you know, different meditative things that they say in order to help heal the PTSD. There's also different modalities where some have you remember that trauma and then kind of change it. Some people have bad experiences with that because it can kind of make them relive the trauma and make it worse. The one that I did, she more so was kind of speaking in symbolism to my subconscious mind and sort of asking it to unravel like knots in my brain, or it's kind of abstract to talk about, so I can make a whole video about how exactly she did this, but it was huge. I would also be like crying every session, which is, you know, a clear sign that there was emotional processing happening, and I loved it. Highly recommend, highly underrated. I really think the hypnotherapy should be a bigger thing. Okay, so the next thing that I do, another huge component of healing these chronic illnesses, is nervous system regulation. You know, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue as well is your body miscommunicating with your nervous system, and it can also often be caused by your body constantly living in fight or flight, and so your nervous system is just frazzled all the time. So doing techniques that calm your nervous system is just absolutely paramount if you want to heal and improve your symptoms in any way. And so examples of this are reducing any elements of stress you possibly can, which I know this can be difficult if you have a job that you hate or are stuck in a living situation that's not good. You know, some things can be slow to change, but take an audit of your life and see if you can pinpoint any of those things and make a long-term plan for how you want to change that eventually, because that's huge. Getting rid of all the stress you can in your life. Meditating first thing in the morning or at any time in the day, meditating is massive, and teaching yourself to be present and calm your nervous system. And learning how to meditate is huge, not just for when you're in that container of meditation for 10 minutes, but also throughout the rest of your day. There's a lot of healing modalities. Like, for example, there's one lady, Irene Lyon, who is well known in the fibromyalgia healing space. I took a webinar from her that I didn't love the entire webinar. I also didn't love that you have to pay for it, because I don't feel like healing should be behind a paywall. I think that's kind of scummy, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do to live. It is what it is. It's not like it's crazy expensive. But I took the class and it has good reviews. I don't know if I personally would recommend taking the class, because I feel like there was a lot of fluff and just a lot of, the information was bloated in a way that I feel like she really could have compressed, especially for people who are dealing with chronic fatigue and brain fog. But the main takeaway that I got from her course is being very present in every moment and being very in tune with your body. Feeling the seat under your body, feeling the floor underneath your feet, feeling your hair on your shoulders, noticing how your body feels, even noticing the pain, and slowing down when you're walking. Just being very present was kind of the main takeaway that I got. And she teaches that, a lot of us are kind of dissociated from being in tune with our bodies. And so sometimes when this happens, the pain will actually get worse, obviously, because you're paying attention to it. But once you work through it, over the days and weeks and months of you meditating, being present, calming your nervous system, the pain then starts to subside. And there's other ways of calming your nervous system. There's certain pressure points on your ears and other points of your body that you can try out. Also singing, humming, vocalizations, even just making humming sounds like that calms your nervous system. When you're doing chores or anything around the house, trying not to rush, trying to really take your time, slow down as much as possible. I know life is busy and it's harder if you have kids and things like that, but as much as possible, not seeing chores as a chore, as something that you don't want to do, but as something that just is part of life. It just is. It doesn't have to be annoying. It just is a thing. So kind of rewiring your brain with all these little aggravations in your life to just seeing it as, oh, it is what it is. Or especially when you're driving, oh my gosh, get rid of your road rage. If someone cuts you off, think oh, they really have to take a shit really badly and they need to go home immediately, and just give them grace. Even if that's not true, it's hurting you more to be annoyed at that person than to just take a deep breath and just observe. Let everything just be as it is. That's huge in calming your nervous system, just observing annoyances instead of letting them get under your skin. Oh, another thing that helps immensely, working from home. Oh my God, this has been so huge in mitigating the symptoms of my fibromyalgia. I feel so honored and blessed that I have a job that enables me to work from home. It was not just the job itself that is a work from home job. I got a reasonable accommodation from my job. I got a doctor's note that advised my job that it would really help my fibromyalgia if I worked from home. And then I went through a whole process with HR to get a reasonable accommodation to work from home. And that has been huge in calming my nervous system and giving me more available energy in the day, because as we all know with chronic fatigue syndrome, that you have to pace yourself. You have to slow down, do less in a day. You might not be able to accomplish as much as an able-bodied person can. And that's okay. I've learned to accept that as much as I can. And working from home, oh my God, is just my greatest blessing. Every single day when I think of my gratitudes, I'm just so freaking grateful that I get to work from home, because it gives me so much more energy to be able to accomplish chores or see my friend occasionally. And that would not be possible if I was working in the office. And, I've worked a lot of in-person jobs, including jobs that have me on my feet all the time while I was chronically ill, and life sucked ass. And so I'm so grateful that I'm now in this phase of my life where I genuinely manifested this situation that I'm in now, and I'm so grateful for that. Also, another thing that hugely improved my health was getting out of bad relationships, whether that's family that I was living with or a partner that I was with that wasn't even bad to me, but it just wasn't an aligned relationship. We weren't compatible. I couldn't see a future with them. Staying in that situation frazzles your nervous system. And so again, not a super quick and easy fix, but really take an audit in your life and seeing which relationships are nourishing you and which ones are taking from you, and moving towards a future where you only have peaceful, calm people around you. And now I'm dating someone lovely and wonderful who calms my nervous system every single day, because he's just such a peaceful, wonderful person to be around. So it is possible to have relationships that don't stress you out. So those were all of my most important things that I do to help my health. But the final last one that I'll leave you with, kind of a little fun one, is just sunlight. Sunlight improves my mental health so much, which then improves my whole body health. I need to live in a home with abundance of windows and light. I need to spend time outside, going for walks, being in the sunshine. Just makes me so happy, and highly recommend. Highly underrated. Sunlight, you need it. So that's everything that I do in order to keep my fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome in check. It hasn't completely cured me. I still do have symptoms, and if I stray away from doing any of these things, then it definitely flares me up. My health comes and goes in waves. There's probably still some things that are unknown that cause me to flare up, because there are ups and downs. So in the future, there's also other things that I want to try and see if they help. I very recently checked Dr. Howard Schubiner, and he teaches a lot of the stuff that I already do about emotional healing and calming your nervous system and all that. But one thing he really focuses on is what he calls the fear-pain cycle. It's kind of like a catch-22 where we begin to fear the symptoms that we have or the things that cause our flare-ups, and that causes us to make our life smaller and shrink and shrink and shrink. And it also makes it so that if you try to envision yourself doing something like going for a really long walk, you can't even visualize it without that fear coming up in your body, or you're not even capable of visualizing doing it in a healthy way. And so if you start visualizing yourself being capable of doing these things and just going about life with less fear, like obviously you can't just mind fuck yourself into being healed overnight. And so you still have to take precautions and pace yourself and do all of the foundational tips and keeping yourself healthy. But when you do flare up, feeling less like it's the end of the world and less about, oh my God, I'm gonna be this way forever, and just be completely present. I'm working on creating a meditation for myself where I do visualize myself doing things like going for long walks, or driving at nighttime is really hard for me. So different things like that I want to improve in the future, I'm gonna include in a meditation where I just visualize myself being healthy and capable. See if I can kind of train my brain to actually be able to visualize myself doing these things. Because right now, if I try to imagine those things, like I physically can't. I start feeling the pain in my body if I try to imagine myself going for a long walk. Like I can't picture it without pain in my body. So that's something I'm gonna try. It's slightly different than brain retraining, which is another thing that's commonly talked about in the fibromyalgia and CFS community. He's not talking about gaslighting yourself. He's not talking about pretending like you don't have this illness, but he is about retraining your brain in a way that you can kind of picture this healthy future life, and you kind of rid the fear that you have that keeps you trapped. So we'll see if it works. If you're curious if it actually ends up helping and works out for me, subscribe, because I'll keep you guys updated on what I think about Dr. Howard Schubiner's method. In the meantime, if you want to check out my video all about how I exercise with fibromyalgia and CFS and tips that I have, you can click and watch that right over here. Or if you want to check out the other content on my channel, I make all kinds of videos all under the umbrella of well-being, so that can deal with mental health, spirituality, dating, and love advice. You can check out this video right over here. But until next time, I'm sending you so much love.